this dance.
So I've decided to keep up this wee pattern I've got going so far by talking about more video game adaptations. But as opposed to talking about TV series on streaming services, I'm talking about movies for a change. Whoa, slow down there for a second, pal. Hello there, it's the post-editing variant speaking right now. Just thought I'd let you know, as the image on screen suggests, I was planning on talking about these films leading up to the release of Mortal Kombat II in October. However, as I got towards the ending of editing this video, it came to my attention that Mortal Kombat II has been delayed from October until May next year for whatever reason. Some people say it's because of your reshoots, some people are saying it's because of the competition that's happening in October. The real answer is just that they're trying to piss me off. But regardless, I decided to upload this anyway, and I'll just see how I feel afterwards. Maybe I'll still do the other ones, or maybe I'll just wait until I'm a bit closer to Mortal Kombat 2, and in the meantime I can talk about something else. I heard K-pop Demon Hunters is pretty good, so maybe I could do that. But whatever, I'll let my variant continue speaking on while I go and consult the Elder Gods about this bollocks. But as opposed to talking about TV series on streaming services, I'm talking about movies for a change. Although Mortal Kombat did have that TV series in the 90s that lasted for like one season, so I suppose I could talk about that at some point. Have you ever seen that? I remember it being very weird.
I was sent to make you suffer, and then kill you. Get over here!
So maybe this is just the thing in my channel now, just talking about video game adaptations. Is there a niche YouTube corner just for that, or is it a bit too obtuse? Is that too specific for the almighty algorithm to get a grip on? I don't know. Anyway, I couldn't give a shit because today I'm talking about In case it wasn't clear by the amount of times I've made references to it in my previous videos, I'm quite the fan of Mortal Kombat. Despite the fact that it's a few years before my time, I honestly don't remember a time where I didn't know what Mortal Kombat was. My first experience with the games was Mortal Kombat Trilogy on the PlayStation 1. Probably, I don't remember for sure. All I remember is that it had the Mortal Kombat 3 aesthetic. However, what I also don't remember is what I experienced first, the games or the movie. Mortal Kombat is an interesting movie for a couple of reasons. For starters, it's one of the earlier examples of video games being adapted into live-action movie form, preceded only by Street Fighter, Double Dragon and Super Mario Bros. It's often cited as one of the best video game to film adaptations, which at the time was a massive accomplishment considering it was preceded by Street Fighter, Double Dragon and Super Mario Bros. And even to this day, many do consider it the best of the bunch, which admittedly you could take as damning it with faint praise considering that since then the competition's been about as tough as Marmite. I mean, I'm sure Marky Mark's Pain has its fans somewhere that unironically think it's the best video game adaptation, though I couldn't even muster a fake reason as to why they might think that. But more power to you, if you do even exist, that is. So, how exactly does one go about making a Mortal Kombat movie in the 90s? Because the biggest criticism that was levelled at this movie back when it first came out was definitely its lack of blood and guts, which is what made Mortal Kombat stand out at the time among other fighting games. So much so that it actually ushered in the ESRB rating system for video games. Parents and politicians everywhere were absolutely fucking horrified at the thought of innocent wee Timothy watching a low resolution animation of a man crudely getting his head ripped off with a spinal cord still attached.
How do you feel about cutting his head off?
Whereas nowadays, nobody gives a flying fuck if wee Timothy glues his eyes to the screen while he watches an extremely detailed high-resolution animation of a man getting his forearm snapped in half, having the protruding bones shoved into his throat, then getting his torso twisted 180 degrees and having his spinal cord torn out through his stomach.
I'm not ashamed to be a killer. I'm proud of it.
But in the 90s, when making a movie that a studio thought would only appeal to 12-year-old boys, there's no fucking scenario in which a Mortal Kombat movie would be allowed that kind of carnage. But even with that, this movie has still maintained a strong following and has had quite the influence on Mortal Kombat as a franchise moving forward, for reasons I'm sure we'll get into. Just in case you're unaware, the plot of Mortal Kombat, without getting into the absurd specifics, revolves around a fighting tournament that determines whether Earth will fall under the rule of Shao Kahn, who's the emperor of a dimension known as Outworld. And in the games you can play as any number of different colourful characters who represent Earthrealm, Outworld, or whoever else might be involved. It's Bloodsport meets Masters of the Universe, basically. And they definitely made the smart decision by mostly sticking with that central premise in this movie, because The lore of Mortal Kombat can be quite mental at times. Like most fighting game franchises, the lore is shockingly expansive, with each passing entry adding more sides to an already overly complicated tesseract of plot that just gets increasingly more ludicrous. Kinda like the Saw franchise, but that's all part of its charm. Honestly, there's so many interesting characters within the world of Mortal Kombat, even from this time period alone, that you could have made a movie about any number of them and made it their story. The approach they took here though was sticking with the three hero characters from the first game, Liu Kang, Sonya Blade and Johnny Cage, and making them the core trio of the story. That's definitely one thing that made this stand out among other video game adaptations, especially at the time. For example, unlike the previous year's Street Fighter, which basically just took the characters' names and were like, let's just play fucking Action Man with them, which, I mean, to be fair, did work in the long run because that movie's a classic in its own right.
And I'm going to kick that son of a bitch Bison's ass so hard that the next Bison wannabe is gonna feel it.
But Mortal Kombat and the people behind it clearly showed so much reverence and made a genuine attempt to actually adapt the lore of the source material, with a few alterations here and there, some more frustrating than others, but it is still kind of impressive considering that this was a time when very few people knew or even cared about the lore of video games. The majority of people playing video games just wanted to pick the character they thought looked coolest and beat their older brother in a virtual fight because he knows he'd get his teeth kicked down his throat if he tried anything like that in reality. In this era of Mortal Kombat, and indeed most fighting games, there was lore and there was a story being told, but only if you wanted them. We live in a time now where narrative often takes the forefront of video games, to such an extent that even Mortal Kombat has fully rendered cinematic story mode campaigns. But back then, if you wanted to learn about your favourite character, you had to uncover it yourself by reading manuals, beating the arcade ladder, and asking that one weirdo who lives in the arcade who claims he knows how to find Reptile yet only seems to happen on days where nobody else is there to see it. But if we're going to take off the nostalgia goggles for a few seconds, this movie definitely has its faults. The effects are obviously a prime example. There are only the mere suggestions of character development and relationships throughout the movie. There's some debatable casting choices, a lot of it feels oddly stitched together, some shit just happens out of nowhere with no explanation, and for as respectable as the loyalty to the source material is, some of it does feel randomly thrown in and is completely impenetrable information unless you're familiar with the game's lore. But this movie knows exactly what it is and what it's trying to do, and for the most part, I think it does it pretty fucking well. But let's talk about our main heroic trio, shall we? Firstly, we have Liu Kang, who, interestingly, is the one character that's probably had the biggest alteration to his lore. In the game, he is the quintessential hero character who is fighting to save Earthrealm. He knows what this tournament is about, he knows what's at stake, he's been training for it pretty much his whole life, which to be fair is here, but it's much more downplayed, and they decided to add this extra layer of motivation, that being that Shang Tsung killed his younger brother. Which, I guess the reason that they chose to do this was to immediately establish a personal rivalry between Liu Kang and Shang Tsung, who are pretty much nemeses in the game's lore, but if you think about it, their rivalry wouldn't have been established until after the events of the first game when Liu Kang wins the tournament. I suppose they felt they needed to give Liu Kang a more personable reason for wanting to beat Shang Tsung. And avenging a fallen family member is a favourite storytelling device, so I guess it makes sense cinematically. It also seems like they decided to just merge Liu Kang with Kung Lao's character. They mention a couple of times throughout the movie that Liu Kang is the descendant of Kung Lao.
I've come to warn you that Kung Lao's descendant is competing in the tournament.
I am Liu Kang, descendant of Kung Lao.
Which, now that I think about it, is a completely out of nowhere line that means nothing to the audience unless you're familiar with the game's lore, because they don't explain who the fuck Kung Lao is. So it's kind of weird that they decided to add in that little detail. Kung Lao is a cool character who is constantly being done dirty in every medium that he appears in. So much so that it's kind of become a joke among MK fans. It's also a bit odd that you never get the context as to why Shang Tsung killed Chan. It's what starts the movie, and the scene somewhat implies that Shang Tsung is specifically targeting Liu Kang for some reason, but this is a nightmare that Liu Kang is having, so I don't think that that is the real context of what's happening. So what is happening? Did Shang Tsung just happen to be at the temple farming souls as well as aura? Was he actually targeting Chan to get to Liu? My personal headcanon has always been that Chan directly challenged Shang Tsung to fight in secret after Liu Kang ran away from the temple, in an attempt to basically cheat the tournament in a way, which obviously goes very badly. Honestly, I think Robin Shaw is absolutely terrific casting as Liu Kang. He has the physicality and the screen presence for it. It definitely helps that, like a lot of the cast, he is an actual martial artist and stuntman. But outside of the physicality, he does have quite a bit of charm to him.
Yeah, I pay money, you carry the bags. Or is that too complicated?
No. I get it.
Out of my way.
Just another starstruck fan, huh?
He's also rocking, quite possibly, the most beautiful mullet I have ever seen on a man.
It's gotta be the hair, Cotton. It's beautiful, feathered, and lethal. You just don't see it nowadays.
Then we have Sonya Blade, who's give a fucks are on vacation about taking part in any sort of tournament. She's after the possibly Australian, possibly British, I'll talk about it, one-eyed thug Kano, who murdered a close friend of hers. Interesting wee factoid, this role was originally intended for Cameron Diaz, but she had to drop out because of a wrist injury while she was doing the training for it. So then Bridget Wilson was brought on board so last minute that she had to do the fight training between takes, which is why they left filming her big fight scene with Kano until last. Now, no disrespect to Cameron Diaz, I'm sure she would have been fine in this role, but I am so glad that this went to Bridget Wilson instead. Now yes, because of the last minute casting, her fight scenes definitely look the most sluggish, but I just love her demeanour and her personality as Sonya. She seems just so fucking done with everyone and everything at all times.
I smell something. Bullshit.
It's like Paul W.S. Anderson gave her only one of two directions. You're either angry at everybody or completely exhausted with everybody. I mean, I can hardly blame her when she's constantly being creeped on by everybody.
Where's Kano?
I don't know who you're talking about. But I'm sure I can help you find him.
I'm looking for a murderer. He boarded this ship.
I'm impressed. But it is my boat, and if you'd like a tour, I'd love to give it to you myself.
You gotta admire her. When she sets her mind on something...
It's not her mind you're admiring.
You've been chosen, Sonya. Much to my delight.
If you are afraid to trust, you will lose.
Hello, baby. Did you miss me?
She's not to be harmed, only humiliated. I have plans for my beautiful Sonya.
You're a creepy bastard.
Sonya's driving force in this movie is of course to find Kano, which again is pretty accurate to the game's lore, although it is unfortunate that immediately after she's literally got nothing to do until she gets relegated to damsel in distress status at the end, which yes I know is accurate to the story of Mortal Kombat 2, but still, she could have had like one more fight scene. Everybody else got at least 2 one-on-one fights. Apparently it was scripted that before her fight with Kano she was to fight Jade, which would make a lot of sense considering that Katana is here, but doesn't really have much to do. She's just there to give some exposition and have Liu Kang give the oh my stars and garters look. I just died on your arms tonight. But I suppose Sonya still got to have her boss bitch moment where she beats Kano while KMFDM plays in the background.
Give it up, baby. I've studied all your moves.
Yeah, study this!
Can you imagine if Sonya was a character invented in this generation? She'd be the one you'd be seeing in all the fucking clickbait YouTube thumbnails that you've been sick of seeing for the last few years. I must say, I find it insulting that they make it look like she's going to do her classic leg grab throw move, but as opposed to actually slamming Kano into the ground, she just gently drops him to the ground. It wouldn't be so egregious if not for the fact that later in the movie, Liu Kang essentially does this move on Reptile. So what's the deal, Paul? That's no fucking cool, man. You know what, it just occurred to me that it is a bit strange that Sonya and Liu Kang don't ever like exchange any dialogue at all about the fact that they have pretty much the exact same motivation for joining the tournament. They're both there for revenge because someone close to them was killed. Like, I don't know, like, do you maybe want to discuss that or something? Maybe you could have good insight for each other. And then of course there's Johnny Cage, the martial arts expert / actor who joins the tournament to try and reclaim some credibility as a real martial artist after the public sees him as a pretend martial artist who doesn't know jack shit about the ways of the warrior. Now, he claims that he's trying to regain credibility as a fighter, but I think the real reason is just because his films are shite. Or maybe it's because he's just constantly beefing with directors.
I'm gonna go. Do you want me to go fucking trash your lights? Do you want me to fucking trash them? Then what? Why are you trashing my scene?
Now, as I'm sure many people already know, the original Mortal Kombat was meant to be a Jean-Claude Van Damme video game, but because he was so wrapped up in other stuff, being at the absolute fucking peak of his career at the time, they made the character Johnny Cage as a homage to him instead. His original design and ball bag buster move was taken straight out of the movie Bloodsport. Now, in the games, Johnny has always been portrayed as a more extreme personality who's an overly brash, self-obsessed twat who just thinks he is so cool. And Lyndon Ashby does bring that cocky, narcissistic vibe of Johnny Cage, but it's got much more of a dry wit to it. I love how he downplays all of his more jokey lines.
Come to a little tournament, he said. Be good for the career, he said.
And I love how he just very quickly accepts the unreality of the world that he's thrust into. That's another thing as well. This movie is actually quite funny. And not in that, you know, oh, it's so old and terrible in an ironic way. No, I mean, genuinely, the attempts at humour are actually pretty funny and don't even have that, like, aged cringiness to them.
This is where you fall down.
Or at least, I think so anyway. So naturally, being based on Jean-Claude Van Damme, the man himself was offered the role of Johnny Cage, but he turned it down because, ironically, he was too busy filming Street Fighter. And look, that probably would have been fun as well, but similarly to what I said about Sonya, I'm so glad that Ashby got this part. Now again, maybe that is just the nostalgia goggles, but I just think he's great as Johnny Cage. They do sorta, kinda try and squeeze in an enemies to lovers type thing with Johnny and Sonya that really doesn't feel like it has anything to it, if we're being completely honest. Like I said earlier, Sonya might as well just leave the island after her fight with Kano. But this relationship did wind up becoming canon in the games, and even resulted in the character of Cassie Cage.
Jeez, guys, I'm right here.
I think that's kind of what they're going for with this, a sort of found family slash friendship story of these individuals who enter a tournament on their lonesome and exit as best of friends. Obviously it's not got very much depth to it because it's a fucking Mortal Kombat movie from the 90s, but I do think that there is a version of the Mortal Kombat story that hasn't been told yet, where that's actually a very beautiful and poignant story. But this movie has bigger priorities, and we'll get to that stuff soon. All in all though, they do make for a fun trio, and they ping off each other quite well, and it is definitely one of the things this movie has as its strongest elements. I honestly think that if this franchise was able to hold on to like this unit of characters, these movies might have like prospered a bit longer, even with how bad things immediately get after this.
Never give up hope.
And then there's Raiden. Now, this is an odd one. Putting the very strange casting decision aside, Christopher Lambert's performance is so bizarre that to this day, I can't even figure it out. Despite the fact that Raiden in the game screams like a complete lunatic while he's fighting. You would probably imagine a guy with titles such as God of Thunder and Protector of Earthrealm would carry some sort of gravitas to him. And to be fair, the film does introduce him that way. He also has this very strange personality and this bizarre sense of humour.
I don't think so.
Now, on the one hand, I kinda like this because I always like it in fantasy or sci-fi or whatever type stories of immortal beings who have lived for so many years and they are portrayed like fucking weirdos, because I think they probably would be weirdos. Raiden has been doing this shit for a long time. Earthrealm has lost its last 9 tournaments and is on its last round for survival, so he probably started going off his nut around about tournament 7. But on the other hand, you kind of want Raiden to have a more imposing, respectable aura to him as the god of fucking thunder. He knows what's at stake and he can't help but find it a bit funny.
The fate of billions will depend upon you. Sorry.
And then of course there's the voice, which is just another one of those bizarre decisions where I'm like, I don't know what he's going for. I mean, sure, Raiden's a thunder god, so giving him a unique voice would certainly distinguish him from other characters, but this is bizarre. He sounds like a fucking gremlin half the time.
You have been chosen to defend the realm of Earth in a tournament called Mortal Kombat.
But look, it is undeniably entertainment, and Christopher Lambert is clearly having a fun time. And he apparently paid for the rap party, so good for him. On to the man allegedly from a land down under. Now, even though this movie had a heavy influence on the games going forward, Kano was probably the most immediate and direct influence, as in the original game's lore, Kano was American/Japanese. But Trevor Goddard's slimy performance was so well received by pretty much everybody that by the time Kano made his next appearance in-game, he had been completely retconned as full-on Australian, which is absolutely hilarious when you know that he's not doing an Australian accent in this movie, but a Cockney English accent. But because Americans can only differentiate the two is when English sounds like Patrick Stewart and the Australian sounds like Mick Taylor.
Because someone stumbles, loses their way, it doesn't mean they're lost forever.
Now, seeing as you're such an amusing fucking Einstein know-it-all bastard, I got this little game we can play.
They misinterpreted Goddard's accent as Australian. Regardless though, Goddard is just amazing in this role, and unfortunately died of a drug overdose a few years after this movie. But his impact on Mortal Kombat is still present in the games to this day, even if it was woefully misinterpreted. However, we cannot talk about the cast of characters in this movie without acknowledging the absolute best characters. The GOAT, the MVP, the show stealer, the main event of the movie, Art Lean. I find it absolutely abominable that Art has never been made playable in Mortal Kombat. The sheer depth of this man is unparalleled. Alright, I'll stop now. It's Shang Tsung. Alright, obviously, it's Shang Tsung.
Your brother's soul is mine.
Shang Tsung is absolutely amazing in this movie. He's just such a delightfully evil villain, played to perfection by Kari Hiroyuki Tagawa. Everything from his voice, his dialogue.
Some of you will even have the distinct honor and pleasure to face Prince Goro.
His drip, his subtle facial expressions, and his not so subtle ones. He carries himself with such smarmy self-assuredness, it's almost infectious. Look at this cunt. That's no aura farming, that's aura harvesting. He's actually so convincing in this role, it's pretty jarring when you see him in interviews and he seems like such a sweetheart.
This character being different from other bad guys that I've done. I think in general though, for bad guys, there's an attraction. I think it's not only that you love to hate him, but I think there's a certain attraction that people will have toward this character.
He's so iconic in the role that he's reprised him multiple times in other mediums, including Mortal Kombat 11, and I am amazed it took that long. He's the origin of what would become the character's main catchphrase.
Your soul is mine.
Your soul is mine.
Your soul is mine.
Your soul is mine.
I'll swallow your soul! I'll swallow your soul!
The VA in Mortal Kombat 1 is literally just doing a Tagawa impression. Hell, someone somewhere was like, you know what, this man is like so good at playing the main villain Shang Tsung in that Mortal Kombat movie, we should get him to play the main villain Heihachi Mishima in a fucking Tekken movie. How fucking interesting is it that in the 90s there was two movies based on arcade fighting games, and the absolute best part about both of them was the guy playing the main villain?
Day Bison graced your village was the most important day of your life. But for me, it was Tuesday.
Challenging Goro, eh? You weren't supposed to fight him now. Are you that eager to die?
Now, for as good as these guys all get represented, unfortunately the biggest letdown of the movie is definitely Scorpion and Sub-Zero being relegated to glorified henchmen of Shang Tsung. While I do think it is appropriate cinematically to make Liu Kang the main character because he's the multi-champion of Mortal Kombat, but Scorpion and Sub-Zero are the fucking poster boys of Mortal Kombat, and they have one of the most fascinating rivalries in the game's lore. They do allude to this a little bit.
Scorpion and Sub-Zero, deadliest of enemies, but slaves under my power.
Leaving the door open for possible elaboration in the future. Oh wait, hold on. I think they did do that in that weird prequel series. Should I talk about that at some point? Maybe I should. Look, to be fair, putting Scorpion and Sub-Zero's stories would definitely have been too much for this movie, so I get why they decided to do it this way. And they do still get some cool moments. Scorpion gets one of the much better fights in the movie with Johnny Cage, which takes place in some abandoned, perfectly aligned woodland area, even though every other fight up to this point has taken place in a ring surrounded by spectators. You know, because it's a tournament, but for some reason Johnny Cage and Hank Scorpio have their fight in the most OCD looking forest area before Scorpion decides that the fight will continue in the Netherrealm. This is one of those weird random moments that I brought up earlier, because this is accurate to the game's lore in that Scorpion can transport you to the Netherrealm if he wants to, but I imagine this would be fucking bewildering to anyone not familiar with the games. They don't even explain it or anything, it just happens. I've never quite understood the choice to turn Scorpion's spear into a snake creature. Now apparently, I don't know if this is true or not, apparently it was a common misconception in the early days of Mortal Kombat that some people thought Scorpion shot a snake out of his hand and not a spear. Now, I don't know, man, but even looking at the first game, it seems pretty clear to me that it's a fucking spear attached to a rope. That being said though, the fight itself is pretty cool. The setting's great, the hits are surprisingly hard, and despite the film's rating, they do manage to slide in a pretty fucking savage fatality for Scorpion. Sub-Zero's pretty disappointing, if I'm being honest. His best moment is obviously when he fatalities that one NPC who's got a torso like a fucking cheese grater.
Let's kick some ice.
But his fight with Liu Kang is a bit, I hate to say it, lukewarm. I do not know why he decides to make the slowest evolving ice dome I've ever fucking seen as opposed to, I don't know, down forward low punch. The best fight in the movie is definitely Liu Kang and Reptile. And no, not just because of the absolute banging soundtrack. I do like how they use Reptile as a quote-unquote hidden character throughout the movie until Liu Kang finds him and fights him, which is what he was in the game. And again, it's one of those weird moments that just has no explanation. Liu Kang throws Reptile into a hollow stone statue, which seems to house some sort of abstract sentient tentacle monster that merges with his raptor form and he becomes human Reptile for a bit. For the record, that's not part of the game's lore. I've never understood why they felt the need to do it like this. Even in the earlier games when Reptile was wearing fake skin to look human for reasons, I've always had the sense that his raptor form looked humanoid in shape, so why wouldn't you just do a practical makeup effect? Or just have him be human Reptile the entire time? Just have him hiding in the background of scenes, poking his face out from behind trees and shit like he's a Scooby-Doo character. I don't know, maybe they just thought it would make for a more dramatic reveal this way. But regardless, it does make for an awesome fight, and I cannot stress how fucking cool I think it is when they just randomly put in the audio of Shao Kahn from Mortal Kombat 2 saying Reptile just before Juno Reactor kicks in.
Reptile.
Wasn't it awesome?
It was totally awesome!
It was the most awesome thing ever!
Like, it doesn't make any sense at all. It's not like any other character got a fucking name announcement from Shao Kahn, but Reptile does apparently. It's like Shao Kahn is in the background somewhere just DJing the fight or something. And Johnny Cage is probably just vibing to it by himself, because he just politely remains outside after witnessing Liu Kang get drop kicked through a fucking concrete wall. And the fight ends with Liu Kang just doing his impossible bicycle kick out of nowhere. They should have added the sound effect though. Robin Shao does actually have some great battle cries. It wouldn't be a Mortal Kombat without characters screaming like fucking lunatics. Also, I do not know why Reptile turns into beasties and insects. If that's even what's happening, I've never quite understood it. Like, why would Reptile turn into insects? Like, were they just housing that statue? Or is the implication that the insects were inside Reptile and he got his, like, stomach tore open or something? You know, because reptiles eat insects. I don't know. Oh, Liu Kang, look who's here.
I just died on your arms tonight.
The ninjas look pretty cool though. Yes, I know people like to joke about their outfits looking like cosplay. They were clearly going for that simple approach. They obviously wanted their performers to have as much mobility as possible for when they were in an actual fight, and I think it works. Also, at this point in time, the Mortal Kombat ninjas were still in the era of being literal palette swaps of each other, so it's not as if they weren't being accurate. I've always really liked their masks. Like, I like how Sub-Zero's has frost all over it, and I like how Reptile's has that Green Goblin mouthpiece. I also love the way he's always like hissing and snarling. It's a shame about how his raptor form looks.
What the fuck is that?
I suppose that's a pretty decent segue into talking about the effects of this movie, because if there is one thing that has aged the absolute worst in this film, it's the CGI. Apparently what they wanted to do with this movie was merge the fast-paced kinetic martial arts action of Eastern cinema with the modern and advanced gorgeous visual effects of Western cinema. And look, it's unfortunate that only 4 years later The Matrix would come out and pretty much do that to damn near perfection, but I'll give this movie credit for making the attempt with a more modest budget. That being said though, while I do think the fights and the choreography is overall pretty solid, the CGI is about as visually pleasant to look at as that horrifying baby from Tin Toy. This is that era of CGI where it was pretty new and exciting and everybody wanted to take a crack at it, but as the great Ian Malcolm once said,
"But your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should."
Thank God they got Reptile in human form at the end, because his raptor form is frankly an appalling creation. He looks like a pre-rendered version of Randall Boggs if he became addicted to methamphetamine. They also can't seem to decide what Raiden's power looks like either. If I didn't know that Raiden was a thunder god in this movie, I wouldn't be convinced by this effect. I don't know what the fuck this jelly portal is supposed to be, but it upsets me. However, shitty CGI effects and woeful green screen aside, there's some really impressive practical work and set design in this. They shot this in Thailand.
Taiwan?
Which ironically was also where they shot Street Fighter, and as you would expect, they film in some really beautiful locations. But some of these sets are actually awesome. The fight between Liu Kang and Sub-Zero might be disappointing, but good God does this set look good. And I love how it's framed like an actual fight in the game. The aforementioned Netherrealm looks great. Look at this fucking room where Liu Kang and Shang Tsung have their final showdown. I would be exercising like Terry Crews if I had a room like this to do it in. I'm honestly shocked that none of these locales have made it in any of the games. That's bizarre. They've added costumes and they've gotten voice actors, but they've never implemented any of these locations. When this movie is not shooting itself in the foot with garish CGI, it's genuinely atmospheric in its unique decor and sets. And of course we can't talk about practicals without talking about Goro. This big $1 million galoot is quite an impressive feat. He required about 16 or something people to operate him at once and apparently was constantly breaking and having technical problems. The guy working him from the inside, that sounds very weird, could only do so for like 2 minutes at a time because he kept running out of oxygen. So they were very limited with what they could do with him, but I think they worked around it quite well. Now admittedly, he does sometimes look like he's just barely upright. When you see more far shots of him, he does look quite elongated, for a lack of a better word. You get the sense that a gust of wind could put him right on his arse. In the game's lore, Goro is definitely meant to be quite a unit. He can talk the talk and walk the walk, whereas here they've characterised him as more of a fear-mongering numpty.
I do not fail!
Like, he's big, strong and scary looking, but that's pretty much all he's got. Well, I mean, he did kill Art Lean, everybody's favourite character. Sonia and I had the exact same reaction upon witnessing his death. She has not interacted with him once. But outside of that one incredible feat of immeasurable strength, Goro is a bit of a fucking pillock who was probably one stray red rubber ball away from getting flattened by an 18-wheeler truck. One punch to his clacker bag and his confidence went straight out the fucking windy. Johnny Cage drops him with almost zero effort. Goro practically threw himself off that cliff. I'm not gonna lie, I honestly felt kinda bad for him in the end. But the legacy of Johnny and Goro does live on because it's constantly being referenced in the games.
Johnny Cage!
Don't you owe me some sunglasses?
The final showdown between Liu Kang and Shang Tsung is a bit disappointing. For as cool as the setting is, you'd kinda hope that this fight would be much more hefty, especially coming after the awesome reptile fight. But the actual fighting between them doesn't last very long. It's mostly carried by Tagawa, again just absolutely devouring the scenery.
You fool!
But it does have its moments though. I like how Shang Tsung emotionally manipulates Liu Kang by morphing into his brother. I like the idea that when Shang Tsung is on the back foot, all of the souls that he's amassed over the decades are able to escape his grasp. I love this line.
All those souls and you still don't have one of your own. I pity you, sorcerer.
Save your pity for the weak.
And I love that absolutely out of nowhere, Liu Kang is able to use his fireball ability and does the pit fatality. Again, despite the film's rating, they managed to squeeze in just the implication of some more extreme violence. And it concludes with that oh so serene orbital song. The soundtrack of this movie is awesome as well. And no, I don't just mean the licensed music in Techno Syndrome, even though Techno Syndrome is one of my all-time favourite songs. It's just, it holds such a special place in my heart. Some people describe it as the most 90s song you could ever imagine. To which I say, no, the most 90s thing you can imagine is the Utah Saints version of that song. But also, the original score by George S. Clinton, I think doesn't get enough credit. It's very epic, but it can also be quite haunting and atmospheric. It's very unique and is very much in line with that darker tone that Mortal Kombat 3 was going for. This movie has also like a really bizarre and hilarious ending. Now on paper, I actually think it's a really cool one, because throughout the movie they constantly reference the Emperor Shao Kahn, who is probably the most iconic villain in the entire franchise. They never name drop him, which I've always found interesting. They just call him the Emperor. So to the unfamiliar, you know from the get-go that Shang Tsung is an underling and there's a bigger, badder guy out there than him just looming somewhere. And after winning the tournament, he makes his big appearance, not accepting defeat. Which, on the one hand, I do admire the confidence of a movie in this era to end on such a wild cliffhanger, but the way Shao Kahn appears in the sky, like he's Lord fucking Zed.
You weak, pathetic fools, I've come for your soul. I am Lord Zed, Emperor of all I see.
Before Raiden tries to palm it off with his wee catchphrase.
I don't think so. I don't think so.
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
And they all square up like they're gonna fight this fucking thing before the customized door to Cerebro closes and the credits roll is the most Power Rangers shit I've ever seen in my life. Why the fuck is he so big? Like, what is going on here? Is this just some sort of illusion by Shao Kahn, or was he actually meant to be that size? He completely destroys this temple, so it seems that he's tangible. This obviously would be immediately ignored in the next movie when Kahn appears as just a normal looking guy. But what was the intention here? Still though, bold as brass to end your movie like this. This wasn't even a post-credits scene, Masters of the Universe style. No, this was a pre-credits scene. Can you imagine if this is where things were left off? Actually, now that I think about it, that probably wouldn't have been a terrible thing. So, is this the best video game to movie adaptation? Well, that's no for me to decide, because it's a subjective, philosophical point of fucking view. But even with that, I've not seen every game to movie adaptation. Like, maybe one day if I decide to watch Jake Gyllenhaal's Prince of Persia, I'll be like, oh my god, this is fucking phenomenal. This is the Dark Knight of game adaptations. I doubt it, but you know, never say never. However, as is and has been for a while now, Mortal Kombat is definitely one of my favourites. And yes, maybe that is just the nostalgia goggles talking, but for all its faults and for how dated it is, I think that this is one of the purest attempts at distilling a video game into film form. Specifically Mortal Kombat in this era, where story and character was very much background details for most people, and the bigger appeal was seeing different colourful characters fighting each other. Sometimes a very weird thing will happen. You'll just wind up in a different location. You might see someone die a horrible death. Now, does that make for a very cohesive and completely satisfying movie experience? No, absolutely not. And I'm sure for most people unfamiliar with Mortal Kombat, this movie's pretty impenetrable. But still, this is an incredibly fun movie, and its influence on the franchise cannot be understated. The absolute reverence that Mortal Kombat and the fan base has for this movie to this day is a thing of beauty. And I also think it's commendable that this movie managed to garner that status even while being heavily restricted. It did not need to be this big gore fest that everyone associates Mortal Kombat with in order to be a decent adaptation. Unlike other video game adaptations of the time, this was a pretty big success. I mean, Street Fighter did alright, but this was a clear success, taking in 124 million on a modest 20 million budget. So you better believe that unlike Super Mario Bros. And Street Fighter, which also had sequel teases, Mortal Kombat got the green screen. I mean the green light for a sequel, which would release just 2 years after, titled Mortal Kombat Annihilation. And boy, oh boy, is it something else, which I will be talking about soon, but for now...
That's enough!
I think you're hard up for a date.
Come on, she's trying to lead us out.
What would you forget about her? She's 10,000 years old.
So what?
Age ain't nothing but a number.